This isn't a lecture. This is a tavern, a mug, and some history you won't find in textbooks. But if you wake up wiser, we won't apologize. This is a mildly disturbing tales, one you can feel under your fingernails. Turn out the lights and listen. Tonight, 24 hours as a medieval innkeeper. Not some artisanal mixologist worrying about organic syrups and foam art. You're Thomas, and your only craft cocktail involves diluting ale and praying no one notices. Your bouncer is an oak staff used on actual brawlers, not just those who complain about the Wi-Fi. You live by the road to York, where patrons demand a warm belly, not a unique customer experience. Forget the polished stainless steel and endless ice. Your bar is a sticky plank. Your biggest threat isn't a bad review, but the ale conner sniffing for real quality control violations. And your clientele? They pay in eggs, not digital tips, and they're more concerned with lice than lounge vibes. You're no modern barista of beer, but people talk about you, that your pottage is warm, your mug usually full, and if need be, you can resolve a dispute with a fist faster than any complaint desk. You don't have mood lighting, just a hearth of clay and the gnawing ache of a life spent serving others in a world that doesn't care about your brand identity. And you have one more day ahead of you. If you like stories like these, subscribe for more. You drift in and out of sleep on a lumpy straw pallet, the darkness heavy and cold around you. In the rafters above, a mouse scritches softly. Somewhere in the thatch roof, a stray drop of dew rolls down and lands on your forehead. You pull your threadbare wool blanket tighter. It smells of smoke and sour ale, and it's about as comforting as being hugged by a wet sheep. A dull ache in your lower back reminds you of yesterday's labors. Comfort? That's a word rich folks use to describe sitting on anything not made of wood. Here, comfort is a fickle dream, much like the one you were having about a warm bed and a full belly before you woke up. In the faint pre-dawn gloom, you can just make out the shapes of the inn's main room. Rough-hewn tables scarred with knife cuts, benches strewn about, and the smouldering remains of last night's fire in the central hearth. The air is thick with the mingled scents of stale beer, wood smoke, and sweat. A familiar chorus of discomfort greets you. The itch of flea bites on your ankles, the twinge in your knees as you sit up on the creaking floorboards. You run a hand through your hair and flick away a louse between your fingers with a grimace. Morning in a medieval inn, your inn, always begins in darkness and discomfort. And yet, this is home. In a few heartbeats, the rooster out back will crow. Your day will truly begin, and the meager peace of the night will give way to the grind of duty. The rooster's cry cuts through the silence, right on schedule. You groan and rise to your feet, joints cracking like twigs. The chill of the stone floor bites at your bare soles, urging you to get moving. In the grey light of dawn seeping through the warped shutters, you shuffle to the hearth. The last coals still glow faintly. You stir them and feed a few splinters of dry wood until timid flames leap up. The newborn fire paints flickering orange shadows on the wattle and daub walls. You warm your calloused hands, which ache from decades of hauling barrels and scrubbing tables. The heat is weak, but you welcome it on your stiff fingers. Pain is a familiar companion, one you've learned to greet like an old friend each morning. Around you lie the inert forms of last night's guests. A travelling peddler snoring open-mouthed by the hearth wrapped in his cloak. Beyond him, near the door, 2 local farmhands who drank themselves to sleep on the bench. All of them share this one common room with you and your family. Your wife and children are still curled up in the small alcove behind a tattered curtain, one of the inn's only semi-private corners for the family. Not that it spares you from the snores and smells of a dozen humans and perhaps twice as many fleas in one room. You step carefully around the snoring men, mindful not to kick anyone. Waking a sleeping patron too early can mean an ill temper or an ill-aimed fist, and you've had quite enough of those for one lifetime. Before anything else, you take an old rag, the one in your hand is technically older than your youngest son, and dampen it from a clay pitcher. With slow, practiced motions, you wipe down the long trestle table in the center of the room. Sticky ale residue from last night clings to the wood, and your rag comes away a shade darker. The table has more knife scars and ale stains than an old soldier has battle scars. As you scrub, you recall that keeping an inn is as much about cleaning as it is about drinking. Heavy taxes and levies from the local lord weigh on you, but so does the daily labor of maintaining this place. If you don't keep the common room reasonably clean and the ale cups free of crust, you'll lose what few customers you have. Or worse, draw the ire of the ale inspectors for unsanitary conditions. Inns suffer under many burdens: the lord's fees, the church's tithes, and the endless chores of cooking, mending, sweeping. You chuckle dryly at yourself. If only the local lord could see you now, a humble innkeeper on hands and knees scrubbing spilled ale off rough wood. No doubt he'd still find a way to tax the very act of cleaning if he could. As dawn breaks, you push open the front door to let in some fresh air. A gust of cold morning breeze hits your face, carrying the earthy smell of wet leaves and the sharp tang of a nearby pigsty. You inhale deeply. The scent is not pleasant, but it's real and bracing. Outside, the sky over Yorkshire is painted in bands of dull pink and muddy grey. Your breath mists in the air. The village cock has finished his crowing, and now distant sheep bleat on the moors. Another day begins. For a moment, you allow yourself a sliver of near-poetic reflection at the sunrise. Then a chamber pot is noisily emptied out an upper window across the road, splattering into the ditch, and the spell is broken. You sigh. Time to tend to the living. Time to feed the fire and get some weak ale and porridge into the bellies of those who will soon wake hungry. Morning, 7 a.m. Chores, aches, and thin ale. By now, the inn's hearth is blazing more confidently, and a pot of peas pottage hangs over it, warming for breakfast. You gave it a stir earlier, a congealed stew of peas, onions, and yesterday's scraps of bacon fat. It isn't much, but it will have to do. You can already smell the faint, familiar aroma, equal parts nourishment and disappointment. As you putter about the hearth, your wife, Alice, emerges from behind the curtain with a shawl around her shoulders. She's as bleary-eyed as you, yet she moves straight to kneading a bit of barley dough for bread. The two of you work in wordless rhythm, a tired dance repeated each morning. She clanks a small iron cauldron onto the fire to heat water for ale brewing, and you set out a few rough, earthenware bowls on the table for breakfast. There's no talk of good morning, only a grunt or two and the shuffling of feet. Love is expressed quietly here, in shared labor and a cup of warm ale left out for one another. One by one, your overnight guests rouse themselves. The peddler by the hearth sniffs the air as the pottage starts to simmer and thickens. The smell of something cooking is enough to draw him from sleep. The two farmhands wake as well, groaning and holding their heads, a hangover courtesy of your home-brewed ale, no doubt. Morning, you mutter to each other as they blink in the firelight. They respond with grunts or half nods. There will be no bright smiles or cheerful banter, not at this hour, not in this era. You ladle out portions of pottage into bowls. It's thin and lukewarm, but the men slurp it eagerly. One of the farmhands pulls out a withered turnip from his pocket, perhaps swiped from a field, and offers it to you as payment for the meal. You take it with a nod, not bothering to argue. Coin is scarce in these parts. Often enough, your customers pay with whatever they have: a handful of eggs, a spool of wool, even a slab of pig fat on occasion. Barter is the currency of a poor village inn. A good chunk of your earnings isn't in coins at all, but in goods you'll have to use or trade later. The turnip, at least, will add something to tomorrow's stew. As they eat, you pour small cups of ale from a pitcher for each man. The ale is weak, cloudy and sour, brewed from the last of the autumn barley, with more than a little water added to stretch it. You quietly pray they won't notice the dilution, but of course they do. The peddler grimaces at his cup, and one farmhand wryly says, "Tastes like you strained it through an old boot, Tom." You offer a thin, sarcastic smile. "Must have been your boot, friend," you reply. A couple of the others chuckle. Dark humor is the coin of everyday conversation here, a shield against the misery. In truth, you're painfully aware that your ale isn't exactly the pride of Yorkshire. But what can you do? Everyone and their aunt brews their own beer in these parts, and the competition is fierce. Only the very best alehouses gain wide fame for their brew, and your little inn's ale is famous to no one except maybe the flies that won't leave it alone. While they finish their scant breakfast, you step outside to tend to the small stable out back. A single mule, belonging to the peddler, chomps lazily at a hay bundle in the lean-to stable. You pat the animal's flank and check its water bucket, breaking the thin film of ice on top. Your own scrawny chickens are already pecking around the yard for insects. The morning sky is brighter now, though a low fog clings to the ground. You can see the outlines of a few neighboring cottages and the twisted oak tree by the village well. A couple of village women tread past on the road, bundled in cloaks, off to milk cows or gather fuel. They give your inn a passing glance. One makes the sign of the cross. You're not sure if that's a greeting or a ward against the kind of devilry they imagine goes on in taverns. The inn does not have a spotless reputation. Few do. Alehouses are seen by some pious folk as dens of sin and vice. You shrug and turn back inside. There are benches to wipe and a floor to sweep. Back in the common room, the farmhands are preparing to leave for the fields, shrugging on their rough coats. One fumbles in his sack and, lacking a coin, places 2 fresh eggs on the table as payment for last night's ale and sleep on the bench. You accept the eggs with a nod that will make a decent supper for your children later. The other fellow, who finds nothing to pay with, mumbles that he'll come chop firewood in exchange sometime. "See that you do," you reply, wagging a finger but smiling thinly. Truth is, you'll be glad for the help. Running this inn is a family affair. You, your wife, and your eldest boy take on most tasks. An extra hand of labor, even for an hour, is a welcome relief. As they depart, you catch a whiff of their unwashed clothes, sweat and dirt, as they shuffle out into the morning. The peddler lingers, adjusting the pack on his mule outside. He's hoping, perhaps, to catch the eye of an early customer on the road. You watch him go with a raised hand. Not many travelers pass through this tiny village unless they have to. But pilgrims, messengers, and traders do use the road occasionally. People in the Middle Ages travel more than many think, and when they do, they all need somewhere to rest. That hope of weary travelers seeking a safe haven is what keeps your inn in business. With the guests gone, a brief calm settles. Your wife has taken the children, when they woke, grumpy and hungry, to the back garden to fetch some onions and to let them run a bit. You seize the moment to down the dregs of the ale left in the pitcher. It's flat and warm. You grimace but swallow it anyway. Liquid is liquid, and it's safer than the well water around here. Besides, breakfast for you is usually just what's left in the cup. You nibble on a hard heel of barley bread from yesterday, dipping it in the ale to soften it. Outside, the sun is fully up, though its weak rays offer little warmth. You feel a familiar tightness in your belly, part hunger, part worry. What challenges will today bring? In an innkeeper's life, one can never be sure. Some days are quiet, just routine drudgery. Other days, the devil seems to spice things up. Rowdy drunks, surprise inspections, fights, or worse. As you chew, You cast an eye toward the corner by the hearth where your brewing equipment sits. A large wooden tub for mash, a paddle, some empty casks. It's about time to start a new batch of ale you usually brew every few days in small quantities. Everyone around here brews ale in their own home, true, but as an innkeeper, you must ensure you have enough to sell. And in truth, your wife Alice is better at brewing than most. When she's not baking or tending the children, she's the brewster of this establishment. The last batch of ale she made is nearly gone after last night. If more travelers come tonight, God willing, or not, you'll need fresh ale ready. You sigh, knowing this means a good part of today will be spent on the tedious, sweaty process of brewing, hauling water, soaking grains, stirring the mash. Your shoulders already ache in anticipation. Before that chore begins, however, you have other messes to deal with. A puddle of something unidentifiable, you decide not to dwell on it, needs mopping near the doorway. The rushes strewn on the floor, meant to keep dust down, are damp and fetid in places. You make a mental note to gather fresh rushes from the riverbank when you can. The current ones have been trodden on for weeks, mixed with spilled ale, grease, and who knows what else. No wonder the place has a permanent musty odor. You fetch a broom made of birch twigs and begin to sweep out the soiled rushes and yesterday's debris. As you do, you reflect wryly on your station in life. Innkeepers hold one of the more lucrative occupations, they say, but only because you're squeezing profit from heavy work and heavier taxes. Coins trickle in from travelers, only to flow right back out in fees to your lord and in bribes to officials. And all the while, you're scrubbing and mending and cooking, day in and day out. Perhaps it's true what they say. Innkeeping can make a man a decent living, but it will surely break his back and test his soul in the process. Late morning, 10 a.m. Ale and inspection. No sooner have you started preparing the mash for a new ale batch than you hear the distant clop of hooves on the road. You pause, ears pricked. Through the open door you see them, 2 riders approaching, their silhouettes wobbly in the morning haze. One is a portly man on a brown mare, the other a younger fellow, perhaps a servant or guard, on a mule. They are not villagers, likely their official business. Your stomach sinks a little. Experience has taught you that riders at this hour often mean one thing: inspectors. Sure enough, as they draw nearer, you recognize the rotund man's attire. Over a muddy tunic, he wears a leather jerkin emblazoned with a faded crest of the local shire. He's the ale conner, the official ale taster for the district, a man whose entire job is to surprise innkeepers and alewives with visits and ensure they aren't cheating the public. And of course, to levy fines when they are. You force a smile onto your face as he dismounts with a huff just outside your door. "Good day to you, Master Henry," you call out, voice measured. The ale conner, a title he prefers over ale taster, waddles in, his small eyes already scanning the room for anything amiss. His assistant trails behind, carrying a ledger and a measuring jug. Master Henry gives a curt nod. "Innkeeper," he grunts. "I trust I'll find everything in order this time." You wipe your hands on your apron, a gesture both of feigned nonchalance and to hide their sudden clamminess. The last time he was here, he found your ale to be a touch weak for the price you charged and accused you of breaking the assize of ale, that ancient law that sets quality and fair price for ale. It cost you a fine of 2 pence, which, though it sounds small, was more than a week's profit gone in an instant. You remember the sting of that penalty all too well. "Of course, sir. Please, have a seat," you say, gesturing to a bench. He wrinkles his nose at a lingering sour odor in the air. You swiftly move to pour him a sample of your current ale from a tapped cask. As the golden brown liquid fills a clean wooden cup, you silently pray to any saint listening that it isn't too watery, or, God forbid, turned vinegary.
This is a new batch from 3 days ago, one your wife brewed with what grain you could afford. It tasted fine enough to you then, a bit thin, but not foul.
Master Henry takes the cup and eyes the ale's clarity by the light. He sniffs it, then takes a generous swig, swishing it around in his mouth pompously. You wash, heart thumping, as his expression shifts from stoic to mildly displeased. He sets the cup down. "Tastes weak," he mutters. "Not giving short measure, are we?" You quickly shake your head. "We use standard measures, as always, sir. Only the best we can do. Small village, you know. Grain's dear." Your words trail off under his withering stare. He motions to his assistant, who steps forward and produces a standard 1-pint pewter measure from his satchel. They mean to test your serving size. You swallow hard and fetch one of your ceramic ale mugs, the same ones you serve to customers, and fill it to the brim from the cask. The connor's assistant pours its contents into the official measure. If your mug is too small, it won't fill the full pint measure, meaning you've been cheating customers with short pours. The liquid sloshes in, nearly reaching the top. The young assistant peers at it levelly, then gives a small nod. By some mercy, your mugs are honest. At least that won't earn you a fine today. Grunts Master Henry. "Lucky for you." He gestures for his assistant to return the ale to the mug, and, to your irritation, proceeds to drink that too. You stand by, outwardly deferential, inwardly cursing that half a pint of ale you won't get paid for. The ale connor isn't exactly known for restraint. Free drinks are a perk of his office. He smacks his lips and delivers his verdict. "It's within tolerable quality. Barely. See that it stays that way." You exhale quietly in relief. No fine today, it seems. The assize of ale, the law requiring good ale at fair prices, won't be the noose around your neck this morning. You've survived his surprise test, though not without a few beads of sweat. "Of course, Master Henry. We take pride in honest pints here." You lie smoothly. Pride isn't exactly what you take, more like resigned necessity. But he doesn't care for the nuance. He isn't finished, however. Wiping foam from his ruddy mustache, the ale connor makes a slow circuit of the room, peering about. He checks the condition of the cask, sniffs at the pottage on the fire. Alice stiffens, worried he might find fault with that too, but he merely grimaces and moves on. His gaze lands on the pile of old rushes you swept up by the door, and the generally shabby state of the floor. "Place could use a good cleaning," he mutters. You force a humble chuckle. "We were just about to replace the rushes today, sir. Been a busy week." He only harumphs. "See that you do. Filth breeds sickness, and we can't have that spreading through the Shire." The irony of his concern for cleanliness, while his own breath smells of garlic and unbrushed teeth, is not lost on you. Still, you nod obediently. The last thing you need is the Manor's Halmote court hearing a complaint that your inn is a source of plague or some nonsense. The Halmote, the manorial court for unfree tenants, can issue fines or worse if you're found negligent in your duties on the Lord's land. At length, Master Henry seems satisfied enough. He makes a final note in his ledger, perhaps marking that he's inspected the King's Head Inn, a fancy name you once gave this ramshackle place, though nobody calls it that, they just call it the inn. With a grunt that might be a goodbye, he turns on his heel and heads for the door. His assistant scuttles after him. As they step out, the ale connor pauses and looks back at you over his shoulder. "Oh, and Innkeeper, next month we'll have the royal justices coming through on circuit. Make sure your ale and your beds are fit for them, if they stop. You wouldn't want a bad report." Your mouth goes dry. Royal justices. Here. It's unlikely they'd bother with such a minor village, but if they did... "Yes, sir. We'll be ready," you reply. He sniffs, unconvinced, then hauls himself back into his saddle with considerable effort.
You and Alice stand in the doorway watching the two riders depart. The moment they are far enough not to hear, she mutters under her breath, "Fat old ale bibber." You allow yourself a low chuckle. It's dangerously satisfying to agree. "I sat here drinking my profits." But beneath the relief lies a trembling of anger and anxiety. These officials hold your livelihood in their ink-stained hands. A single accusation of sour ale or watered beer can mean the stocks or heavy fines. Official ale tasters have the power to ruin small innkeepers, and they know it. This one enjoys the power a bit too much for your liking. Still, it could have been worse. No fine today. That's a victory, however small. You'll take it. Alice has already returned to her brewing, pouring hot water over malt in the mash tub. You join her, grabbing the wooden paddle to stir the mixture of crushed barley and water. Steam rises in a fragrant cloud, filling the room with the bittersweet smell of wort. It's almost comforting, that smell. It reminds you of your childhood, when your mother used to brew ale in her own cottage kitchen. Brewing was women's work then, and still is largely. Alewives are common, and many have a sharper nose for quality than men. You glance at your wife, who is measuring a bundle of herbs to spice this ale. Hops are still a novelty around here, used sparingly if at all. Her brow is furrowed in concentration. She knows the stakes. If this ale turns out poorly, you'll not only lose precious grain and time, but possibly face the ale connor's wrath next visit. "Not too much bog myrtle, love," you caution gently, as she's about to toss in the herbs. She arches an eyebrow. "I do know how to brew, husband," she retorts quietly. You raise a hand in apology, smiling. Despite the fatigue lining both your faces, there's a flicker of warmth between you. Shared struggle binds you together more tightly than any courtship ever could. In this rough life, having a partner who can brew a decent ale and endure hardship with you is perhaps the greatest blessing you have. Together you work, hour by hour, through the late morning. The chores are unending. Once the mash is done steeping, you'll have to boil it, then let it cool and add yeast to ferment. While waiting, you find other tasks. You step out to chop some firewood from the small pile of logs. The rhythmic thunk of your axe into wood rings out in the crisp air. The effort sends spikes of pain through your shoulders, but at least it's a pain that puts food on the table. Unlike the pain from that old toe you broke kicking a drunk out last year, that one just nags for no good reason. You recall that incident. A brawl on a cold night. Two men quarreling over dice. One swung a stool, another pulled a knife. You intervened with nothing but these two hands and a hefty oak branch. Inns can become violent in a heartbeat, and an innkeeper must be part peacekeeper, part bouncer. That night you earned a limp and lost a perfectly good stool to splinters, but at least no one died. Others have not been so lucky. The coroner's rolls are full of tales of tavern misadventures, cracked skulls, stabbed bellies, all from too much drink and too little sense. As midday approaches, you notice the sun climbing high and your stomach rumbling. The turnip the farmhand gave you is roasting in the ashes of the hearth now, adding a pleasant, earthy aroma to the room. Outside, the village sounds come alive. Distant church bells marking the hour, a dog barking, a cart creaking down the road. Perhaps it's someone coming from the market at York, or a local farmer hauling manure. Either way, none of it stops for you. Your world is this inn, these four walls, and whoever comes through that door. You wipe your brow on your sleeve, streaking it with sweat and a bit of ale mash. Time to prepare for the next part of the day, and pray that the afternoon is kinder than the morning. Midday, 12 p.m. Barter and burdens. Noon brings a brief lull in your toil. The new ale batch has been boiled and now sits in a covered tub to cool. There it will wait until you pitch the yeast later. Your wife has stepped out back to hang laundry. She managed to quickly wash a few rags and the children's tunics, though the water was cold and brown with peat. The children, bless them, are chasing a scrawny hen in the yard, their laughter the one sweet note in an otherwise drab day. You allow yourself a half smile, watching them, a rare moment where they can play, oblivious to the hardships around them. Inside, you settle at the table to eat a humble midday meal. Dinner, they call it, not that it resembles the fine dinners of lords. For you, it's a bowl of this morning's leftover pottage, bulked out with the now soft roasted turnip, and one of the fresh eggs lightly poached in the broth. It's actually decent, and you take your time with each spoonful. As you eat, you notice the quiet. No patrons at the moment, no urgent task this very second. Even the fleas seem to be giving you a respite. Likely they're off feasting on the discarded straw pile by the door. You lean back for just a minute, letting the warmth of the hearth and the weight of the meal settle in. Weariness tugs at your eyelids. A midday nap is an impossible luxury, but oh, how your body yearns for it. You chuckle under your breath. The only time you sit down all day is to eat, and even then you're calculating how many bites you can take before someone or something needs your attention again. Right as that thought crosses your mind, the door scrapes open. Of course. You straighten up as a familiar face enters. It's old Wilfred, a local shepherd from the edge of the village. The man's as gnarled and weather-beaten as an old oak stump. He shuffles in, cap in hand, and offers a gap-toothed half-smile. "Good day, Innkeeper," he rasps. "Got anything warm? The wind's nipping out there." You nod and gesture for him to sit. Wilfred isn't here to spend coin, you already know that. He rarely has a farthing to his name. Instead, he carries under his arm a bundle wrapped in cloth. As he sits at the table, he unveils it to reveal 2 rounds of goat cheese, modest in size but rich and creamy by the looks. "Brought ye these, in trade maybe, for some ale and a bite?" he says hopefully. Your eyes light on the cheese. That is a valuable trade indeed. Cheese will keep for a while and provides much-needed fat and flavor in your family's diet. It's far better than the few pennies he doesn't have. You nod, trying not to appear too eager. "Aye, we can manage that." With barely concealed relief, Wilfred places the cheese on the table. It's likely part of his rent paid in kind to the Lord, but perhaps he skimmed a bit off for himself. You won't ask. You fetch a clean bowl and dish him some of your pottage, adding a hunk of barley bread on the side. Then you pour him a small jug of ale, maybe a bit more generous than you normally would, given the wind outside and the promise of cheese. Wilfred sighs contentedly as he sips the ale and spoons the stew. Not bad, he mutters. Better'n yesterday's, anyway." You're not sure if he means the weather, the stew, or life in general. Probably all 3. He soon begins talking. Lonely old men tend to, especially after a drink. You half listen as you tidy up the kitchen area. He's prattling about sheep prices and an illness among the flock, and how the Lord's steward doesn't care that half the lambs died this spring. You nod sympathetically. Small talk in a small village is a litany of woes and gripes, and an innkeeper is expected to lend an ear. It's part of the unwritten job description. Taverns and inns are the social hubs of any community, places where folk share news, complaints, and gossip. Even in a hamlet like this, you hear every scandal and sorrow sooner or later. Wilfred's voice drops to a conspiratorial tone. "Heard tell the Lord might raise taxes again come Michaelmas," he says, eyes darting to ensure no authority is around, as if one would be lurking under the bench. You grimace. "Wouldn't surprise me." Heavy taxes are the refrain of our lives. The local lord squeezes us, the church takes its tithe, and then the king's sheriffs come asking for their share for wars in France or some other bottomless pit. Just last year, a royal levy for the war had you scraping the barrel, literally, to find enough coin. You ended up paying partly in salted eels and candles because coin was so scarce. The royal collectors took it, albeit with a sneer, because they knew full well a rural inn had more provisions than pennies. Wilfred shakes his head. Don't see how we'll manage more. Might be more folks'll run off to the woods, join outlaws. He says it quietly, and you raise a brow. There have been whispers that some peasants, desperate and unable to pay the ever-mounting rents, slip away in the night to live beyond the law in forest hideouts. It's a dangerous path. If caught, they'd be punished harshly. But desperation makes men bold. You yourself have felt that pang of hopelessness in the dark of night. What if we just left? Fled the taxes, the drudgery, the inspectors. But then where would you go? With a family, no less. No, you're chained to this inn as surely as a serf to his lord. The thought tastes bitter, and you chase it away with a gulp of your own ale. The door opens again, this time admitting a gust of wind and a young boy, one of the miller's sons. He scampers in, cheeks flushed. "Dar says the ale he took yesterday was sour," the boy announces boldly, parroting whatever he was told. You set your jaw, the miller ever a charmer. The truth is, the miller still owes you for 2 jugs of ale from last week. You suspect this is his way of delaying payment, complaining about quality. The boy holds out an empty clay jug, presumably expecting it to be refilled gratis. You take the jug and give the lad a steady look. "Tell your dar I'll send over a fresh batch soon," you say evenly. "But remind him he's got an outstanding account here." The boy shrugs in that way children do when caught between adult disputes. You draw a bit of the half-fermented ale from the cooling tub. It's not truly ready, but it's what you have, and pour it into the miller's jug. It's not lost on you that the miller, who does handle all the village grain, always seems to plead poverty when it's time to pay up, yet miraculously has silver to spend at the fair on feast days. But you hold your tongue. Crossing the miller could mean subtler retribution underweighing your flour next time, or accidentally mixing chaff in. In a small community, you need to pick your battles. The boy scurries off with the jug, and you add yet another tick in your ledger of debts. If all the villagers paid their habs, you might actually break even more often. But as the old saying goes, better trusted than rich. If you refuse trust, credit, you'd have even fewer customers. So you extend credit, accept barter, and pray that you get enough in return to keep the ale flowing. Wilfred has finished his meal and seems to have dozed off on the bench for a moment, his chin on his chest. You gently tap the table. "Wilf, you alive?" He snorts awake. "Oh, aye, I should be off." He stands, joints popping audibly, and gives you a thankful nod for the stew and ale. He knows he got the better end of the bargain with those cheeses, as do you, but neither of you says it aloud. He'll repay in other ways, perhaps by sending travellers your way if he meets any on the road, or helping thatch the roof next spring. In villages like this, coin may be king, but barter and favour are the queen and prince that actually keep things running. Before leaving, Wilfred adds quietly, "Watch out tonight. I hear there's a pack of mercenaries roaming the region. Some lords' discharged men. They've caused trouble at inns not far from here. Refusing to pay, roughing up innkeeps." You frown deeply. News like this is worrisome. Armed, unemployed soldiers spell danger. They're as likely to rob you as pay you. "Thanks for the warning," you say soberly. He pats your shoulder. "You're a good lad, old Thomas," he says, using the nickname folks have given you. It's an affectionate tease. You're perhaps in your late 30s, but village life and endless work have carved more years into your face. They call you Old Thomas because you've always seemed older than your years, stooped and greying from innkeeping's burdens. You manage chuckle. "Aye, feeling older every day." With that, Wilfred sees himself out, pulling his threadbare cloak tight against the day's chill. You stand alone in the now quiet common room again. The afternoon light slants in through the door, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. You feel an odd kinship with those dust motes, blown about by forces beyond control. Mercenaries on the roads, tax hikes on the horizon, villagers too poor to pay these, are the winds that buffet your little life. You rub your face with both hands, feeling the grit and sweat on your skin. It's tempting to curse, to rail at the unfairness of it all. But who would hear? The thick walls of your inn would absorb the words, and you'd still have chores to do. So instead, you roll your shoulders, stretch your aching back, and get back to work. There are empty ale jugs to scrub, a task you particularly loathe. The yeasty dregs stink, and the scouring sands rough up your hands. There are onions to slice and hang to dry in the rafters. And you must check the back storeroom, a tiny closet really, where you keep precious stores like salt, a few smoked herrings, and the last of the autumn apples. Inventory is low. It's always low. Perhaps tomorrow you or your son will go to the nearest market town to barter for more grain or buy candles. That is, if you can save up a few pennies without the lord or a thief taking them first. With a grunt, you heft a new sack of straw, freshly cut from a neighbour's field as part of a trade, and begin spreading clean straw across the floor. The old rushes have been swept out, left in a reeking pile for later disposal. As you scatter the straw, the inn instantly smells sweeter, a mix of dry grass and sunshine. You know it won't last. By tonight, the floor will be trodden with mud and spilled drink again. But for now, in the quiet midday, you savour the brief cleanliness. Each straw on the ground is like a small act of defiance against the encroaching grime of life. Overhead, the wooden beams creak as a breeze picks up outside, rattling the ill-fitted shutters. A few early autumn leaves skitter in through the open door, orange and gold on your new straw floor. You leave them. A bit of colour does no harm. The sun has passed its zenith now, and begins to cast long shadows of the doorframe and tables. You realise with a start that you've made it halfway through the day. 12 hours down, 12 to go, give or take. A cynical smile tugs at your lips. Perhaps you should paint that over the door. Abandon hope, all ye who enter, at least until sunrise. Shaking off that thought, you step outside for a moment to splash your face from a bucket of rainwater. The cold water shocks you alert, washing away a layer of sweat and dust. You run wet hands through your thinning hair. In the distance, clouds gather. Could be rain tonight, which often means more people seeking shelter in the inn. More souls under your roof, for better or worse. Toweling off with your apron, you steel yourself for the second half of this endless day, the half where most of the madness usually happens. Afternoon, 3 p.m. Between peace and pandemonium, afternoon light slants amber through the slits of your shutters. The village has fallen into its post-lunch quiet. Even the usual barking dogs seem to be napping. You relish this brief calm. The inn is empty of guests for the moment, save your own brood. Alice has taken the children to gather mushrooms in the nearby woods while the weather holds. You're grateful. It keeps the little ones busy, and maybe tonight's pottage will be improved by a few earthy chanterelles. Meanwhile, you remain behind, tending to slow tasks and keeping an eye on the road. You sit by the open door, a bucket of water and a length of frayed rope at your feet, busy mending one of the stools that got a bit wobbly. With your knife, you carefully shave the end of a leg to even it out before lashing it tighter with rope. The repetitive work is almost meditative, and your mind wanders. Across the empty room, the new ale quietly bubbles in its tub as fermentation begins, a hopeful sound of tomorrow's stock brewing. The fire is banked low, only embers now, since you don't need much heat until this evening's cooking. A lazy fly buzzes around a crust on the table, one you missed during cleanup. Your eyes feel heavy. A full belly and a quiet inn are a dangerous combination for a weary innkeeper. You pinch your arm lightly to jolt yourself awake. No time for dozing. Someone must keep watch. And indeed, just as your chin was about to dip to your chest, you hear distant voices and the trudge of footsteps on the road. You rise and step outside, squinting down the path. Coming up the road are a handful of figures. At first, alarm jolts you. For a second you think it could be those mercenaries Wilfred warned of. But as they get closer, you see a very different assemblage. 2 women in modest but travel-worn clothes, one stout and middle-aged, the other younger carrying a swaddled infant. Along with them, an older man in a threadbare cassock, a monk or friar of some sort, pushing a small handcart. On the cart is a wooden barrel and some bundles. Pilgrims, perhaps, or itinerant folks of some religious bent, making their way slowly along the road. They approach with caution, eyeing your establishment. It's nothing grand to look at, a single-story structure of timber and plaster, the roof thatched with reeds. Above the door hangs your sign, a weather-beaten wooden plank, carved long ago with the faint outline of a boar's head, a reference to St. Eustace's boar, supposedly. But mostly it's just the only thing you could draw passably. The sign creaks on its iron bracket as the breeze picks up. The older woman speaks first. "Good day. Might you have a spot for us to rest, and perhaps a meal?" Her accent isn't local. Sounds like she's from further north or maybe the Dales. You nod amiably. "Aye, we've room. Not much by way of luxury, mind." You glance behind them, half expecting to see more, but it's just these three. Well, 4, including the babe. They seem harmless enough. The friar, you can tell by his partially shaved head, the tonsure offers a polite smile. "God's blessing on this house," he says breathily. He looks exhausted, dust clinging to his sandals. They settle at a table, grateful to set down their packs. The baby fusses, and the young mother bounces it gently, trying to soothe the child. You fetch them some water first. Just a clean cup of well water. You boiled it this morning to kill whatever might lurk, then let it cool. After all, even ale can't be your only drink, not for a crying infant. The mother thanks you softly. "What's your road, then?" you ask in a friendly tone as you ladle some broth from the perpetual stew pot into bowls. You always have something cooking over the hearth, and right now it's a thin cabbage soup with a bit of that goat cheese rind tossed in for flavor. It's not hearty fare, but warm enough. The stout woman answers between sips of water. "We're bound for York, eventually. Been walking since sunup. We heard there's an shrine there where miracles happen." Her eyes dart to the infant meaningfully. Ah, you think. The baby must be unwell or frail, and they're seeking divine help. The friar nods. "The lady seeks St. William's aid for the child," he clarifies, confirming your guess. St. William's shrine in York is indeed known for pilgrimages. You neither encourage nor discourage. You've seen enough of life to know sometimes faith is all people have. "York's a good ways yet," you simply say. "You'll be needin' rest." The older woman, who introduces herself as Margaret, bobs her head. "If you'll have us, maybe for the night. We can't pay much." She opens a small purse and gingerly places a few coins on the table. 2 farthings and a clipped half-penny. It's a pitiable sum. You know what those coins represent. Likely they begged or scraped savings for this pilgrimage. Part of you is tempted to say keep it. You'll take them in free. But charity is a luxury you can rarely afford. Still, you're not about to turn out a mother and child. "That'll do," you lie kindly, sweeping the coins into your hand. Covers a meal and space by the hearth for the night. You decide you'll make up the difference by maybe watering a bit more ale for the next drunk or eating a smaller supper yourself. Charity, after all, might earn you some points with the Almighty, and you could use all the help you can get. They eat gratefully, and you bring a small cup of ale for Margaret and the friar to share. The younger mother declines any ale, likely because of the baby suckling at her, so you give her a cup of warm water with a slice of apple in it instead. The friar introduces himself between spoonfuls as Brother Ranulph, a wandering friar of the Franciscan order. You eye his tattered robe. Indeed, he looks the part of a man who has taken vows of poverty most seriously. Despite his weariness, Brother Ranulph attempts a jovial tone. "A fine establishment you have here. The Lord's work providing hospitality." You suppress a smirk. Hospitality, sure. The Lord may approve of it, but it's the Lord of the Manor who makes it a trial. Margaret chimes in. "We heard at the last village there was an inn here, and thank heavens it's true. We feared having to sleep in the open. There are unsavory folk on the roads these days." You recall Wilfred's warning and nod. "You heard right. There are outlaws and worse roaming about. Best you stay inside after dark. The mother, who hasn't spoken yet, closes her eyes in what looks like tired gratitude. "God bless you, sir," she whispers. As they finish their modest meal, you let them rest at the table while you tend to a few tasks, giving them space. It's clear from their slumped postures and the mother's half-closed eyes that they're drained. The baby has finally dozed off, tiny fists peeking from the swaddling. A rare peace has descended in the inn, 3 weary travelers quietly murmuring prayers or thanks, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the distant rustle of leaves outside. This is a gentle interlude, you think to yourself. Not all hours in an inn are chaos, some are simply human, humble and soft. You almost feel a pang of guilt for your constant cynicism. Here you are, providing shelter to a pilgrim and a poor mother, living up in a small way to the biblical call of hospitality to strangers. The friar would no doubt say you're earning heavenly merit. You're not so sure about that, but you know it feels right to help them. However, the afternoon isn't over, and neither are an innkeeper's troubles. Just as you collect their empty bowls, your eldest son, Thomas Jr., comes running back from the woods, breathless. He is 12, skinny as a rail but fleet-footed. "Da!" he calls, eyes wide with alarm. You rush to the doorway, Margaret and brother Ranulph glancing up in concern. "What is it, lad?" He pants. "Riders! Coming fast! From the west!" Your heart skips. Mercenaries? Thieves? Or maybe just a courier? You motion him inside. "Get in." The pilgrims look at you, frightened. You gently urge them. "Go in the back, behind the curtain, just in case." The mother clutches her baby and follows Margaret and the friar toward the back area where your family sleeps. They crouch there, peering nervously. You and your son stand at the door, watching the bend in the road. Sure enough, you hear the drumming of hooves. 2 horses, no, 3, and the jingle of tack. They're moving at a fair pace. You grab the stout oaken staff you keep by the door, a precaution. Your heart thuds. The riders round the bend. 3 men on horseback wearing mismatched bits of armor and carrying weapons openly. One has a crossbow slung on his back, another a sword at his side, the third a cudgel. Mercenaries or armed travelers, as feared. They slow as the inn comes into view. The leader, a bearded man with a faded blue surcoat, barks a command, and they trot right up to your door. "Ho there, innkeep!" he calls, voice rough. "We seek ale and victuals." His tone is somewhere between demand and courtesy. Up close, they look road-worn and none too friendly. But you see no open malice. Yet. These could be former soldiers down on their luck, or just brash men who expect service. Either way, turning them away isn't an option. That would surely provoke them. You force a smile and bow your head slightly. "Welcome, masters. You're just in time. We've ale and stew hot." Behind you, your son hovers. You gesture subtly for him to take the horses to the trough. He darts forward, and to your relief, the men let him grab the reins and start watering the beasts, grumbling something about, "Be careful with that mare, boy." They dismount and stomp inside without further ceremony. You catch a whiff of them as they pass. Sweat, leather, and the metallic tang of old blood, perhaps. They've seen combat recently, by the looks of their dented gear. One has a bandage on his arm, brown with dried blood. Mercenaries indeed, likely released from service after a border skirmish or simply wandering between wars. They clatter into the common room, finding seats. One immediately strikes his palm on the table. "Ale, and be quick!" You nod and move behind the makeshift counter where the cask stands. As you pour, you keep your face neutral, even polite. But inside, adrenaline courses. These are the unpredictable moments an innkeeper lives in dread of. Armed strangers with short tempers and long thirsts. You set 3 wooden tankards of ale before them. The leader takes a deep swig, ale slopping over his beard. He belches approvingly. "Not bad," he says. "Better than that horse piss we had in the last hamlet." The second man, the crossbowman, is already eyeing the room. He notices your staff leaning by the doorway and gives a sly grin. "Expecting trouble, innkeep?" "Only from the rats," you answer lightly, trying a bit of humor. "They grow big around here." The third man, younger, with a nervous energy, laughs at that. "Ha! Big rats, eh? I've skewered a few of those myself." He pats the dagger at his belt. You note every detail, how their weapons sit, their postures, their level of intoxication, so far, sober. You are cataloguing threats in your mind, even as you fetch them bowls of stew and some bread. As you serve the food, the leader grabs your wrist abruptly. You freeze. "Any news on the road ahead, innkeep? We came from the west. How's the way east to York?" His grip is firm, bordering on painful. You swallow. "Can't say for sure, master. Not many travellers of late. Some say the bridge at Tadcaster washed out in a storm, so you might need to ford further down river." He squints at you, gauging if you're lying or withholding. Then he releases your wrist and grunts. "We'll manage." They tear into the food like starved wolves, talking low among themselves. You catch fragments, complaints about a lord who didn't pay what he promised, crude jokes about a camp follower, and an argument over which road to take next. The crossbowman mentions heading south to London, more opportunities for men of their talents in a big city, he reckons. The younger one isn't so sure, fretting about the law there. The leader tells them both to shut it and eat. Standing behind the counter, you maintain a calm facade, but your mind races. How to get through this without incident? One wrong word and they could decide to trash the place, or worse. The best outcome is they eat, drink, pay, if you're lucky, and leave peacefully. The worst? Well, you've seen the worst before. You still recall that tale from a neighboring village. An innkeeper's wife assaulted, the inn torched, all for a few pennies and sport. Your jaw tightens. Not here. Not if you can help it. To your surprise, as they finish their late lunch, the leader actually pulls out a coin pouch. "What do we owe then?" he asks, brusquely. You were half expecting them to claim poverty or simply bully you into a free meal. 6 pence, you say, a deliberately high price, partly because they ate enough for 6 men, and partly anticipating they'll haggle or shortchange anyway. Sure enough, he snorts. 6? For pig slop and small beer? You spread your hands in a resigned manner. "We're a long way from any town, sir. Provisions are costly. But, if coin's tight, I'm sure we can come to an understanding. Better to get something than provoke them over full payment." He eyes you for a moment, then unexpectedly chuckles. "You're a shrewd one, innkeep. Overcharging rough men with weapons. Bold." He fishes out 4 pence and flicks them onto the table. "There, that's all your stew was worth. And count yourself lucky we pay at all." Relief washes through you. 4 pence is honestly more than you thought you'd see. You nod quickly. "Thank you, masters. Much appreciated." You collect the coins. The crossbowman stretches and stands, casting a glance toward the back of the room. For one sick moment, you think he spotted the pilgrims hiding behind the curtain. But he only needed to relieve himself, apparently, as he walks toward the door. "Got a privy?" he asks. "Out back, left side," you answer, gesturing. He leaves to do his business. The remaining 2 linger, finishing the last of the ale. The younger one scratches at the bandage on his arm and asks, more to his leader than you. "Think that friar back in Coxwold gave me a bad poultice. This cut's foul." The leader grunts unsympathetically. Should have cleaned it in vodka like I told you. Then his eyes drift to the side of the hearth, where Brother Ranulph's small handcart is partly visible, its barrel poking out. "What's this, then?" he asks, standing up to look. Your heart thuds again. "Oh, that's, the ale I brew," you bluff. "Fermenting in the barrel." He frowns. "No, behind it. There's a cart." He steps forward. At that moment, mercifully, your wife appears at the door returning from the woods, basket of mushrooms in hand, and the 2 children trailing. The distraction works. The leader's attention shifts to her. "Well, well," he says with a sly grin. "Didn't realize you had company." You move swiftly, intercepting his line of sight as politely as possible. "My wife, Alice," you say firmly. She eyes the armed strangers warily, but curtsies a bit. The presence of a woman, especially an innkeeper's wife, often reminds such men to show a modicum of respect, one hopes. The leader dips his head. "Ma'am." He looks like he might say something lewd, but perhaps the family tableau softens him. Your young daughter peeks from behind her mother's skirts, wide-eyed at the armored man. He merely clears his throat. "Right, we'll be on our way." The crossbowman returns from out back, hitching up his belt. They clomp to the door, where your son has dutifully brought their horses back from the trough. You step out with them, maintaining the courteous host act. "Travel safely, masters. Roads can be perilous." The leader smirks as he swings into the saddle. "We are the peril on the road, Innkeep." His companion laughs at that. You manage a thin smile. True enough, you think. They kick their mounts and depart in a spray of pebbles and dust, heading eastward with a clatter. You watch until they vanish around the bend. Only then do you let out a long breath you didn't realize you were holding. Your wife comes up beside you, placing a steadying hand on your arm. "Trouble?" she asks softly. "Not this time," you murmur. They're gone. Inside, Margaret, Brother Ranulph, and the young mother emerge cautiously from the back, relief evident on their faces. The friar mouths a silent Deo gratias. Thanks be to God. You share that sentiment. That could have turned very ugly, but by luck or providence, it passed without incident beyond a short payment. Your son looks at you, a question in his eyes. Did we do well? You nod at him subtly. Yes, he did well staying calm, tending the horses. You'll tell him properly later. For now, you need to restart your heart and get the inn back in order. The afternoon sun is now dipping toward the horizon, shadows lengthening. The quiet that returns is not as soothing as before. It's tinged with aftershocks of adrenaline. You realize your shirt is damp with sweat, but there's no time to rest. Evening is approaching, which means the real business of the day, the local patrons and night travelers, will soon begin. You roll your shoulders, trying to release the tension. Inside, you comp the pilgrims another round of soup for free to help them recover their nerves, and, frankly, to apologize for the scare. The friar blesses you with perhaps a few many words of piety, but you take it in stride. The young mother's hands still tremble as she holds her bowl. "Are such men common here?" she asks quietly. You shrug. "Common enough these days. But rest. You'll be safe tonight. We bolt the doors at dark." A reassuring half-truth. A determined armed man could break through your flimsy door, but you don't mention that. Instead, you focus on routine, clearing the mercenaries' table, collecting the 4p they left. You bite one coin surreptitiously. Real silver, it seems. This small pile of coins and what Margaret paid might actually make today modestly profitable, if nothing else goes wrong. Your wife and children are already busy, Alice chopping those mushrooms and onions for the night's pottage, your daughter fetching a jug of water from the well, your son readying spare straw bedding near the hearth for the pilgrims. The inn is a family enterprise, and everyone has snapped back into motion like parts of a well-worn machine. You catch Alice's eye and share a look of mutual gratitude that the scare is over. She then cracks a rare smile and nods toward the coins in your hand. "At least they paid something," she says under her breath. "Aye," you reply with a smirk, "and only insulted my stew in the bargain." In the face of lingering fear, you both choose humor. It's the only shield you have against what could have been. You tip an imaginary hat. "Add bold highwayman negotiator to my list of talents." She snorts softly and returns to stirring the pot. The day has not finished with you yet, but if you've survived armed mercenaries with purse intact, you feel almost optimistic that you can face the ordinary rabble of the village tonight. As you light a few tallow candles and lanterns against the encroaching dusk, you whisper a quick, sly prayer. "Thank you, Lord, for not letting them kill me. And please, just a quiet evening would be nice. But I won't hold my breath." With that, you brace yourself for the next hours, when the humble drudgery of day turns into the boisterous toil of night in your little Yorkshire inn. Evening, 6 p.m. The tavern's twilight crowd. Dusk settles over the village like a threadbare cloak, not quite covering all. The western sky glows faintly orange, while shadows pool in the lanes. You step outside to light the hanging lantern by the inn's door, signaling to all around the warmth and light and ale await within. The lantern's flame splutters to life, casting a buttery glow on your faded sign. Almost immediately, as if drawn by the beacon, the first of the evening regulars appears. Old Matthew, the woodcutter, shuffles in before it's fully dark, as is his habit. He's a man of habit indeed, always sitting on the same bench near the end of the table, always ordering a half-pint of ale and nursing it slowly. He claims it's for his health. "Ale keeps my joints loose," he says, though you suspect he just likes an excuse to sit by the fire and grumble about the youth. You greet him by name and have his half-pint ready before he even asks. He slides you a pebble, a small polished stone from the river. This is an odd form of payment he insists on. These lucky stones he finds. You have a growing collection of them behind the bar. Maybe one day you can build a second inn out of lucky stones. But Matthew also occasionally pays in chopped wood for the fire, so you humor his quirks. Soon after, a couple of farmhands swing by, not the same as those from last night, but similar. Muddy boots, sunburned faces, timid coin purses. They collapse onto a bench, groaning about the day's labors on Lord What's-His-Name's fields. "Back's killin' me," one complains, rubbing his shoulder. "You think your back hurts," the other retorts. "I've been bent over barley rows since dawn. My spine's like to snap." You interject with a bit of gallows humor as you serve them who ales. "If it snaps, least you'll be spared tomorrow's work," you say dryly. They laugh and raise their cups in a mock toast to that grim idea. Overheard, old Matthew chimes in. "Back in my day, we did twice the work and ne'er whinged about it," which prompts some good-natured heckling from the younger men. The social hub springs to life, the inn as village common room, where old and young exchange banter, and the day's frustrations melt into communal griping and laughter. You notice the friar, Brother Ranulph, quietly edge out from the back where he'd been resting to observe the gathering. He likely hasn't been in a lively tavern atmosphere in some time, given his wide-eyed look at the easy camaraderie, laced with profanity, on display. The mother and baby are asleep on a pallet in the corner, and Margaret sits near them, watching over them and occasionally crossing herself at a particularly lewd joke flying from the farmhands. As darkness deepens, more locals trickle in. The miller arrives, speaking of the devil. A barrel-chested man with flower dust still in his hair. He gives you a curt nod and plants himself with the farmhands, who shift over to make room, albeit a bit tensely. Everyone owes something to the miller, or feels cheated by him, but they tolerate him for the sake of ale and peace. The tailor, Simon, also comes in, a thin, nervous fellow, joining old Matthew's end of the table. He's not much of a drinker, but he comes to gossip. Within an hour, the tavern is abuzz with conversation. The fire is crackling merrily again, thanks to some logs your son placed, and the air thickens with the smells of smoke, sweaty bodies fresh off work, and the more pleasant aroma of Alice's mushroom onion pottage simmering. You and your wife bustle about, refilling cups, ladling stew into wooden bowls, slicing chunks of hard cheese and coarse bread for those who can pay a bit. It's work, but it's also a performance of sorts. You play the attentive host, joking here, consoling there, keeping the atmosphere just cheerful enough that people linger and maybe have that one extra drink they'll regret tomorrow. At one point, Simon the tailor pipes up to share the latest news from York, likely gleaned from peddlers or the Lord's steward. They say the new assize of bread and ale was cried in the city last week, he says officiously. The price of ale is to be held fixed, lest the brewers cheat us, and short measures will be punished for sure. He wags a finger as if scolding any would-be cheaters in the vicinity. The miller rolls his eyes. That's city talk. Here folk just drink what they get. A few nod. You keep silent with a polite smile, not about to invite debate on ale standards with customers. But Brother Ranulph, perhaps emboldened by the company, speaks up gently. It's meant to protect the common folk, that law. Ensure they get good quality ale in fair measure. A just measure for a day's labour. The miller snorts into his cup. Aye, and does the law ensure a fair measure of grain for us who bake the bread? No, sir, it does not. He's clearly still sore over the scrutiny that bakers and brewers face. Last month I was fined 2 pence at the manor court, because someone said my loaves were too light, as if I'd cheat the weight. He looks around defensively. Old Matthew cackles. Oh, we all know you wouldn't cheat, Miller. You're as honest as the priest is sober. A round of laughter ensues. Even the miller grins grudgingly. The village priest, Father Edmund, is known to have a heavy hand with the communion wine, and any other wine he can get. Thankfully, Father Edmund isn't present. He rarely enters the inn, at least not openly. Perhaps he feels it unseemly, or perhaps he's just nursing yesterday's wineskin at the rectory. Either way, the quip at his expense lightens the mood. As more ale flows, tongues loosen. Gossip flits about. The blacksmith's wife is pregnant again. The Lord's reeve caught someone poaching rabbits but let him off for a bribe. A travelling tinker claimed King Edward himself might pass through Yorkshire soon. A dubious rumour. The inn is performing its age-old role. A crucible where news, gossip and rumour mix and spread. You catch bits and pieces as you work. It's a fine line, keeping everyone content but not too drunk. A tavern keeper must modulate. A little more ale to the jovial ones, a little watered ale to those getting too rowdy, and a sharp eye on any simmering feuds. You spot one such potential. The miller and one of the farmhands, Tom by name, have edged into a debate over some missing bushels of barley from last harvest. The farmhand insinuates that the miller misweighed the grain. The miller flushes red. "Mind your tongue, boy," he growls. The farmhand's friend puts a calming hand on his shoulder. You quickly intervene, wiping the table near them with your rag and smiling. "More ale, gents," effectively distracting them. They both grunt and hold out their empty cups. You pour a bit and tactfully change the subject. "Say, Miller, did you hear anything about that new toll on the bridge?" Immediately he latches onto that, complaining about toll collectors, and the farmhand is forgotten. Crisis quietly averted. This time. At the far end, old Matthew is regaling Brother Ranulph with a, perhaps exaggerated tale of a wolf he fought off years ago with just a firebrand. The friar listens politely, though he looks a tad unconvinced. Margaret, the older pilgrim woman, has relaxed somewhat, and even cracks a smile at the villagers' antics. She's cradling the now awake infant and feeding the babe a bit of mashed peas from a bowl Alice gave her. The sight of mother and child in the corner lends a tender note to the scene. Even the rough men soften their voices a bit when passing by her, as if instinctively protective. Someone tossed a log on the fire, and it sparks upward, drawing eyes for a moment as we all bask in its glow. For a fleeting moment, you feel something close to contentment. This is the inn at its best, a refuge from the dark, laughter outweighing sorrow, community supplanting loneliness. You catch Alice's eye across the room, where she's serving a slice of cheese to Simon. She gives you a small, tired smile that says, "We're managing." You nod back. Yes, managing. The earlier scares of the day are distant memories in this warm bubble of light and camaraderie. But, as with all things, especially in an alehouse, balance is precarious. Comfort often walks hand in hand with its rowdy cousin, chaos. And chaos, in a small way, is about to pay a visit. It starts with a raised voice. One of the farmhands, Tom, emboldened by his ale, is pestering the tailor Simon about a debt. "I know you got paid by Sir Gilbert for that doublet. You owe me a penny from Lammas." Simon flushes and stammers that he had to use that money to buy new needles, but Tom is insistent and getting louder. You drift closer, ready to step in. Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, the miller has cornered Brother Ranulph into a theological discussion which, by the miller's ale-fueled logic, now involves questioning why God gives some men, like lords, so much, and others so little. The friar tries to respond with doctrine about trials and virtues, but the miller's getting agitated. You feel the atmosphere beginning to tip, like a pot starting to boil over. Time to act. You clap your hands loudly. "All right, friends. How about a song, eh? A song to lift spirits." It's a calculated risk. Sometimes a song unifies a crowd. Sometimes it sparks more argument over the lyrics. But you know Tom the farmhand fancies himself a singer after a drink or two. Sure enough, he blinks, distracted from berating Tama Simon, and grins. "A song! Aye!" He stands, swaying just a bit, and launches into a familiar local ballad about a farmer who chased his cow into the bishop's garden. It's a silly, mildly bawdy tune. The tension in the air deflates as others join in the clapping rhythm. Even the miller, who was gearing up to lecture the friar on unfair providence, forgets his ire and bellows the chorus. "And the cow, and the cow, and the bishop said, 'Wow!'" Laughter ripples through the room at that line. Brother Ranulph, though not singing, smiles and taps his foot. Perhaps the first truly relaxed posture he's shown since arriving. Margaret hums softly along, rocking the baby. You lead the second verse, pounding the table in time, doing your part to keep the energy directed and positive. Crisis averted again, by transforming it into communal merriment. The song ends with a drunken whoop from Tom and applause all around. People love a good chorus, and for a moment, all grievances are forgotten in the absurd image of a bishop chasing an errant cow. You take advantage of the jovial mood. "Well sung, lads. Now, how about some stew to soak up that ale? Half price for the next hour." A bit of self-interested suggestion. Selling more stew means people won't be quite as drunk, hopefully. Several take you up on it, clinking a couple of farthings onto the table for bowls. You shoot Alice a glance to dish out more portions. She rolls her eyes subtly, knowing you're just trying to mitigate the drunkenness, but complies, ladle at the ready. Night has fully fallen now. Through the door's cracks and shuttered windows, the cool night air seeps in, but the inn is warm, a haze of smoke and human breath. The lanterns and firelight cast dancing shadows on the walls. It's getting late. One or two villagers have already stumbled out to find their way home, with varying degrees of steadiness. Old Matthew is dozing by the hearth, chin on his chest. You'll have to prod him out soon or let him sleep there. The friar has retired to the back room, where your family's quarters are, joining the pilgrims for what rest they can find. You'll be shuffling some of your kids to sleep on the floor so the strangers can have space. It's not like your own family has proper beds either, just pallets and straw ticks. But offering that tiny measure of privacy to a mother and baby is the decent thing to do. The miller is one of the last still nursing an ale, stubbornly determined to savor every drop since he paid nothing for it. You'll square that debt eventually in flour or favors. The two farmhands are about done. One is quietly humming the cow song again, the other head down on the table, snoring softly. All told, the evening went as well as one could hope. No fights, no injuries, only minor quarreling. A relatively good night for a tavern in these times. You decide it's time to gently herd the remaining locals out. Too late an evening leads to trouble. Besides, you have an early morn to face again. "All right, friends," you announce. "Time to settle up and head on home. The cock's not far from crowing." A hyperbole. It's probably only a couple hours past midnight, but a nudge they recognize. The miller waves a dismissive hand. "Aye, aye, I'm off. Can't stand your hard benches no more anyway. Me arse is numb." You grin. "Comfort? That's a word for rich folk, Master Miller. Next time, bring a cushion." He chuckles and lumbers to his feet, dropping a token coin, amazingly an actual penny, on the table, likely to show off that he does pay sometimes. The farmhand who's awake rouses his snoring friend. "Come on, up you go. We got fields waiting." The other groans, wipes drool off his chin, and staggers up. They settle their small tab with a few vegetables they left earlier, and a promise to help patch your fence next week. Good enough. One by one, you usher them out into the cool night. You hand the miller a small lantern to light his way, with a stern, "Bring it back in the morning," since you know he will, if only to avoid being fined for stealing. Outside is moonlit and quiet, a stark contrast to the noisy conviviality inside. They depart with slurred farewells, disappearing into the darkness toward their homes. Finally, you close the heavy door and slide the wooden bolt across it. A deep sigh escapes you. Silence. Not complete. There's the crackle of the dying fire, the soft snores of old Matthew, who is still by the hearth, and the gentle fussing of that baby somewhere behind the curtain. But compared to earlier, it's peaceful. You survived another evening. No inspectors barging in, no brawl to break up, no sudden disasters, beyond a spilled ale or two. Just a normal night. Your wife appears at your side with a candle, the warm light illuminating her tired face. "He fell asleep, didn't he?" she whispers, nodding toward old Matthew. You nod. Together you approach the old woodcutter. He's too frail to walk all the way home at this hour. It's not the first time he's dozed off here. Gently, you and Alice rouse him. "Hey, what? I'm awake," he snorts, blinking. You offer him an arm. "Come on, Matthew. You can lie by the hearth tonight. We'll put some blankets down." He mumbles something that might be "thank you" or might be "leave me be," but he's too groggy to resist. You settle him on a spare pile of straw near the fire, covering him with an extra cloak. He'll be fine till morning. Many inns might just toss him out, but you know the man's in his 70s. Every winter is a triumph he's still here. Perhaps you've a soft spot for the old drunk, or perhaps you just figure an extra body by the fire keeps the ghosts away. Now comes the final bit of drudgery, cleaning up. Even though exhaustion drapes over you, you can't stomach leaving the place too messy overnight. Sticky tables attract vermin. Together, you and Alice clear wooden bowls and trenchers, stack them for washing. Tomorrow, that can wait. You mop up spills with the rag, now absolutely black and reeking. Tomorrow you'll boil it, or maybe just burn it, and sacrifice a new one. The floor is strewn with bits of rush and crumbs, and a few lost chicken bones someone gnawed. You sweep lightly, not to perfection, just enough that it won't draw every rat in the county. Your wife yawns and you mirror it. The day's long hours show on her face, in the slump of her shoulders. "Off to bed with you," you murmur, touching her arm. "I'll finish up." She's too tired to argue, giving you a grateful nod. "Don't tarry long," she replies. "The candle's low." Indeed, the last candle by the bar is guttering. Alice slips into the back room where the family and pilgrims sleep. You can hear her shooing one of the children over to make space, and a brief whisper of exchange between her and Margaret. You take a moment to sit on a bench by the dying fire, alone in the common room save old Matthew's gentle wheezes. The sudden stillness is overwhelming and soothing all at once. Your feet throb, relieved to be off them. You stretch your arms and roll your neck. A chorus of pops from your stiff joints echoes in the quiet. A mouse scurries out to grab a fallen breadcrumb near the wall. You watch its tiny silhouette without alarm. At this point, you could make a pet of the mice. They're better company than some customers. Your gaze drifts over the now empty room. How different it looks from a few hours ago. Now just a humble, dimly lit space, wood and shadows. The benches are askew, bearing scuff marks from countless nights of shuffling and occasional scuffling. The long table is damp in patches where ale or stew spilled. In the corner, the lone cradle for an infant, which you'd fetched earlier for the pilgrim mother from a neighbor, rocks gently as the baby within sleeps. The cradle was yours once, for one of your own children, long outgrown. The cycle of life continues. New babies born, old men nodding off by the fire, and you, somewhere in the middle, carrying on as innkeeper through it all. Your eyes feel heavy. The warmth of the embers lulls you, and for a moment you toy with the idea of just curling up right here on the bench for the night. But no, you have a straw mattress waiting, and a wife who'd likely prefer you beside her, even if only to steal some of your warmth on a chilly autumn night. Summoning the last scraps of energy, you push yourself up. In the darkness, you navigate mostly by memory. You check the front door, definitely bolted. The small side window shutters, latched. You gently rake the hearth, banking the fire so it will hold some heat till morning without flaring up dangerously. A few red coals glow in the ash, like the eyes of tiny demons peering out. You spit into them for good measure, superstition perhaps, or just habit, and the eyes hiss and dim. Time to put out the last candle, but before you do, your gaze catches the remnants of the day's takings on the counter. A little pile of coins and tokens. You take them in hand, and by the feel sort through. A few silver pennies. Bless those mercenaries, stingy though they were. Some copper farthings. A small heap of odd barter items. A thimble, a lucky stone, that polished pebble old Matthew paid with. And what's this? A decent flint knife someone left as collateral, maybe. You'll try to recall who and return it. But if not, it's yours now. It isn't a king's ransom, but it's something. You tuck the coins into your purse, which you then hide in the usual spot, under a loose floorboard behind the bar. It wouldn't fool a determined thief, but at least it's not obvious. The barter goods you set aside to deal with later. You chuckle, noticing someone even paid with a bit of pig fat wrapped in cloth. Truly, currency takes many forms here. Pig fat is useful. It will go into the pan for frying tomorrow. Every little bit, every crumb and coin, you must make count to keep this place, and your family, going. Finally, you snuff the candle wick between moistened fingers. The darkness is thick, but your eyes adjust to the faint glow of embers. You navigate to the back by memory and touch. Pushing aside the curtain, you enter the small alcove that is your family's sleeping quarters. The room is cramped. A straw-filled sack ticking that serves as your bed occupies most of the floor. You can make out the shapes of your children curled up together under blankets on one side. In the other corner, by the tiny slit of a window, Brother Ranulph's outline is visible. He insisted on sleeping sitting up against the wall, as monks often do when on the road. Margaret and the young mother share another straw pallet with the infant between them, all bundled in spare cloaks. It's a full house tonight. Alice has left a spot for you on your mattress. She's already half asleep, one arm draped over where you should lie. Carefully, you ease in beside her, trying not to rustle too much. She stirs and whispers, "All well?" You whisper back, "Aye, sleep." She murmurs something that might be "good night" or "don't forget to," but trails off, sleep reclaiming her. You lie on your back, staring up at the dark thatch above. A single draught of night air sneaks through a gap, chilling your toes through the blanket. You wiggle them, finding a warm spot against your wife's leg. She snorts softly and shifts. The quiet is profound. Your body feels leaden, sinking into the prickly straw. In the silence, your mind finally has space to replay the day's events. 24 hours in this life. It feels like a lifetime and a blink at once. The morning's cold chores, the ale connor's stern face, the barter with Wilfred, the terror of the mercenaries, the laughter of the evening crowd, all drift through your consciousness like figures in a half-remembered play. Did all that truly happen since sunrise? It did, and you were at the center of it, as always. A faint sense of pride washes over you. Not a boastful pride, but a quiet acknowledgement. You kept everyone fed, drunk, safe, mostly, and the inn still stands. It's a small victory each day to survive intact. They don't sing songs about innkeepers in the great halls, but perhaps they should. Who else wrestles with lice, debts, spoiled beer, and belligerent guests all in one day and lives to tell? Your hands ache as you clasp them over your chest, feeling the myriad nicks and scars in the dark. Your right knuckles still sore from that old fight, a burn scar on your forearm from an errant hearth ember, calluses from hauling casks. These are the badges of your trade. No knight's armor or merchant's ledgers, just these rough hands and tired bones. You chuckle internally. If only the young squires dreaming of adventure knew that true endurance is not in slaying dragons, but in cleaning ale pots day after day. Beside you, Alice softly snores. You wonder if she dreams of a different life, perhaps one where the beds are soft and the ale flows for her rather than from her. You reach for her hand under the blanket and give it a light squeeze. In her sleep, she squeezes back. It's a small gesture, but it speaks volumes. We're in this together. Your eyes drift shut as the long, long day demands its due rest. In the darkness behind your eyelids, images dance. A cow in a bishop's garden, you nearly grin. The ale conner dripping ale from his breeches. Did you imagine that, or was it a wish? Little Jane's face lighting up when you gave her that extra piece of cheese at supper. The mercenary's cold eyes. The friar's gentle smile. The flicker of your lantern against the dusk. All the miseries and absurdities melt into a hazy tapestry, the pattern of a day in your life. You consider praying. A wry thought passes through your mind. The friar's presence perhaps nudges that impulse. Should I thank God for getting me through this day? The cynical part of you adds, but the last time you prayed, your best hen died the next morning. You almost snort at your own dark joke and hope you didn't say it aloud. No, perhaps not a prayer, but a simple gratitude. If not to God, then to fate or luck or sheer stubborn will. Thankful to be alive, to have coin in the purse or under the floorboard, to have your family safe and sleeping around you, and a roof that, mostly, doesn't leak. These are things many do not have. Even the hardships, the lice you'll probably itch at come morning, the debt you still owe the Lord next week, the sour ale that needs extra honey to mask. Even those seem, in this moment of exhaustion, manageable. They are the devil you know, and you'll take a known devil over an unknown one any day. As you drift towards sleep, a poetic whisper of thought comes, perhaps the remnants of that young dreamer you once were before life made you a cynic. In the hearth's last glow, you are the guardian of small warmth against the vast cold night. Your inn is a tiny island of light in a dark world, and for all its troubles, it's yours. Here you make a difference, however humble, a full belly, a lifted spirit, a safe night's rest. Outside, a light rain begins to patter on the thatch. You can hear the soft tip-tap, and you think of those travelers snug here instead of out there on the road. You've done well by them, and in turn, perhaps someone, somewhere, unseen, does well by you. A reciprocity of mercy, if you will. Your final conscious thaw is an ironic one. If I get any more sentimental, I'll put myself out of business. A ghost of a smile on your lips, you finally surrender to the weight of sleep. In the deep of night, the inn lies silent and still. You sleep, old Thomas, the weight of the day finally lifting as dreams take you. In your dream, perhaps you are young again. Perhaps the inn is quiet and clean. Perhaps debts and aches do not exist. Or perhaps you dream of nothing at all, just a black, peaceful void. The rain outside increases, drumming a soft lullaby on the roof. Everyone under your roof slumbers safely. The pilgrims on their holy journey, the old man by the hearth, your children huddled together, your wife by your side. The embers in the hearth pulse gently, as if the building itself breathes in sleep. For these few hours, all the troubles of the living world are suspended. No drunkards call your name, no lord's men pound on the door, no pots boil over. There is only the sound of breathing and rain, the scent of wood smoke, and the faint sour sweet of ale in the casks. In this liminal time, your inn is more than a business. It's a sanctuary, a poor man's castle. And you, the weary king of this one-room realm, finally at rest on your hard-won throne of straw. The darkness enfolds you like a merciful blanket, and you sink deeper into it, recharging for the inevitability of dawn. Soon enough, the rooster will crow again, your eyes will crack open, and your hands will search for that rag or that pot or that log to throw on the fire. You will wince as you rise, another new pain or cramp to shake off. You'll start it all over, the next 24 hours in an endless cycle. But that is the tomorrow you don't have to face just yet. In this fleeting stillness, if some kindly spirit or passing angel looked in on the scene, they might smile at the noble absurdity of it. A day in the life of an innkeeper, full of toil and trouble, ending not in riches or renown, but in simple rest with loved ones near and a roof overhead. There is a quiet heroism here, unsung but profound, a life kept going through every small crisis and triumph. And so you sleep, and the inn sleeps with you. The last thought that flits through your fading consciousness is oddly content. Perhaps there is comfort in this discomfort, meaning in this madness. Or perhaps it's just the ale-soaked fatigue speaking. Either way, you give yourself to the dark and the rain's melody. "Good night, old Thomas," the walls seem to whisper. "You've done what you could with the day, and for now, that is enough." Outside, beyond the puddles and the silent village, the world continues in its cold way. But here, under your thatched roof in this midnight hour, there is warmth and there is rest. The innkeeper sleeps, and with him sleep the trials of the day, at least until the first light of dawn creeps back in to rouse him for another humble, heroic day.